Ah, welcome. I trust you are ready for a new mystery to unfold.
The Death Behind the Shattered Mirror, a Hercule Poirot mystery, narrated by Stephen from Cozy Mysteries. Chapter 1. The Reflection of Death. The autumn mist clung to the Yorkshire moors like a shroud as Hercule Poirot and his faithful companion, Captain Hastings, approached Blackwood Manor, an imposing Georgian mansion of solemn stone and long windows glimmering with damp. They had been summoned by Inspector Meadows of the local constabulary, who, though presented with an apparently straightforward suicide, felt the prickle of something amiss. "Monsieur Poirot," Meadows said at the threshold, his weathered face lined with concern. "I'm grateful you came so quickly. The deceased is Mr. Reginald Blackwood, London financier, aged 52, widower, no children." Inside the grand foyer, Poirot's eyes began their quiet inventory. Marble floors buffed to a moonlit sheen despite the early hour. Stern-faced ancestors in gilt frames, a chandelier casting small galaxies across polished wood. "The circumstances of discovery?" he asked. "Mrs. Pemberton, the housekeeper, found him at 7:30 when she brought his tea," Meadows replied, leading them along a corridor panelled in mahogany. The study door was locked from the inside, key still in the lock. Mr. Carstairs, the estate manager, helped break it down. They paused at the splintered oak door. Poirot examined the fractured jamb with the gravity of a surgeon. The lock, engaged beyond doubt. "Absolutely," Meadows said. Within, behind an imposing mahogany desk, lay Reginald Blackwood, silver-haired, well-kept, distinguished even in death. Yet the room was ruled by the shattered mirror, an antique that had hung above the fireplace, now scattered in 1,000 glittering fragments across the Persian carpet. "Cause of death?" asked Poirot softly. "Single gunshot wound to the right temple," Meadows answered. "Webley revolver in the right hand. Powder burns consistent with close contact. Everything points to suicide." Hastings, who had been quietly observing, cleared his throat. "A dramatic way to manage it, smashing a mirror first." Meadows nodded. "That's the part that troubles me. Mrs. Pemberton swears the mirror was intact yesterday evening." "And yet," Poirot murmured, crouching among the shards, "if a man resolves upon self-destruction, why does he concern himself with reflections?" He pointed to the carpet, a faint shoe impression, smaller than the dead man's, and, near the desk edge, a smudge of ash with an unusual reddish tinge, not the ordinary grey of cigarette or pipe tobacco. "Has anyone else set foot here since discovery?" Poirot asked. "Only myself and a constable," Meadows said. "We've preserved the scene." Poirot's gaze drifted over open ledgers, neat columns of figures in a precise hand, along with letters torn from their envelopes, expensive stationery embossed with London Club crests and bankers' marks. "A household census, if you please," he said. "Mrs. Pemberton and the indoor staff in their wing. Mr. Henry Carstairs in his cottage on the grounds. The gardener, old Tom, left by 6, Meadows replied. And Miss Victoria Blackwood, the niece, arrived unexpectedly 3 days ago." "Unexpectedly?" Poirot repeated. "She rarely visits and usually announces herself," Meadows said. "This time she appeared with luggage, saying she needed a rest from London society." Poirot's moustache twitched. His eyes moved once more over the wreckage of glass. Each shard returned the room at a new angle, as if the truth lay not in any single pane, but in the pattern of refractions. He rose, brushed an invisible fleck from his perfectly pressed trousers, and glanced, by instinct, at his cuffs, then paused. One of his own monogrammed links, usually a matched pair of modest gold, was missing. The pale morning widened at the tall windows, laying cold light upon ledger, letter, and glass. "The mirror is broken," Poirot said at last, voice low, "but it may yet reflect the truth, if one knows how to look." Chapter 2. Fragments of Truth. The morning room at Blackwood Manor held the understated grace of an English country house, polished wood, fresh flowers, and an air of composure that barely masked the tension beneath. Yet grief, like mist, had crept into every corner. As Poirot and Inspector Meadows entered, three figures looked up from a hushed breakfast. "Miss Victoria Blackwood," Meadows said, "allow me to present Monsieur Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. They are assisting with the inquiry." Victoria rose, composed but pale. She was perhaps 28, with the calm, brittle elegance of London society, alabaster skin, carefully coiffed blonde hair, and intelligent grey eyes that flickered with something unreadable. "Monsieur Poirot," she said evenly, "Inspector Meadows mentioned an expert, though I cannot imagine why. Uncle Reginald's death, while dreadful, seems quite simple." "Ah, but mademoiselle," said Poirot softly, "grief often clouds what is plain. Accept my sympathies." At the far end of the table sat Henry Carstairs, the estate manager, a man in his 60s, rough hands folded around a cup of tea. "Terrible business," he muttered. "Mr. Blackwood was demanding but fair. I'd not have believed he'd do such a thing, though lately he seemed strained." "Strained?" Poirot inquired. "Financially, I'd say," Carstairs replied. "Urgent letters from London. Telephone calls at midnight. He worked until all hours." Beside him sat Mrs. Pemberton, the housekeeper. Her neat black dress and red-rimmed eyes betrayed both discipline and grief. "I found him this morning," she said faintly. 30 years I've served this family. Never have I seen such a sight." Poirot inclined his head. "When did you last see him alive?" "At 7:30 last night," she replied. "I brought his dinner on a tray. He seemed distracted but polite. Told me to retire as usual." "And the mirror?" Poirot asked. "Whole and gleaming when I cleaned the room at 4, she said. "A family heirloom. It's hung above the mantelpiece for generations." Poirot's gaze drifted toward Victoria. "Mademoiselle, your visit was unexpected, I believe." A delicate flush rose in her cheeks. "I needed rest. Uncle offered me refuge. I arrived Tuesday." "And his mood?" "Preoccupied," she said quickly. "We dined Tuesday and Wednesday, but he barely spoke." Carstairs cleared his throat. "If I may, sir, there were strange visitors, well-dressed men from London. Came at odd hours, met him privately in the study. One arrived Tuesday evening. Expensive overcoat, leather portfolio, stayed 2 hours." Victoria frowned. "I retired early that night. I knew nothing of any visitor." Mrs. Pemberton's expression changed. "Now that you mention it, sir, there was something odd Tuesday evening. One of the crystal glasses from the cabinet went missing, and there was a scent, sweet but spicy, not wine or tobacco, like incense, almost foreign." Poirot's eyes brightened. "Très curieux." He turned to Victoria again. "Forgive me, mademoiselle, but are you aware of your uncle's will?" She hesitated. "Yes, I am his sole heir, but that does not mean—" "Mais non," Poirot said. "We merely collect facts." Inspector Meadows closed his notebook. "The coroner will arrive shortly. We've delayed proceedings until your examination is complete." Poirot nodded. "Merci, Inspector. One final matter. Did Mr. Blackwood wear jewellery?" "Cufflinks, perhaps." "Always," said Mrs. Pemberton. "Gold with the family crest, and his father's pocket watch." "Both recovered?" Poirot asked. "The watch, yes," Meadows replied, "but only one cufflink." Poirot's moustache curved slightly. "Most interesting," he murmured. As they left the room, Hastings leaned close. "I say, Poirot, you've lost one yourself." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mon ami, perhaps not lost, but found in another's story." Chapter 3. The Powder of Deception. When Poirot returned to the study later that morning, the November light slanted through high windows, tracing silver lines across the floorboards. Dust drifted in the quiet air. The revolver still rested beside the blotter. The shattered mirror glittered faintly like ice. Poirot moved with deliberate grace, his mind already cataloguing the smallest details. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured. The body lies behind the desk, 6 feet from where the mirror hung. If the shot caused the fall, most fragments would lie close to the fireplace. Yet look, several pieces rest near the desk itself. They could not have flown so far unless thrown. Inspector Meadows frowned. You mean the mirror was smashed deliberately? I suggest only, Poirot replied, that the vibration of a gunshot alone could not produce such violence. He studied the mantelpiece, where splinters of gilt frame clung to the wall. It was struck, mon ami. See here, the wood bruised, the nails bent inward. Someone wished that mirror broken. His attention shifted to the reddish ash near the desk leg. Kneeling, Poirot gathered a pinch into an envelope, sniffing lightly. Curious, he said. This is no tobacco. The scent, sweet, pungent, suggests an incense used ceremonially, not common in Yorkshire. Hastings looked doubtful. What sort of ceremony would a banker perform in his study? Poirot's lips twitched. Perhaps not one of prayer. On the desk lay the ledgers, open to pages of neatly written numbers. Note these corrections, Poirot said. The earlier figures are steady, the later ones erratic. The pen digs deep. See how agitation leaves its mark. He was desperate. Meadows leaned in. Losses? Considerable. South American ventures, I think. If these are true, Monsieur Blackwood faced ruin. Poirot moved to the drawers. The centre lock bore faint scratches. Inspector, was this drawer found open? Yes. We assumed he opened it beforehand. Yet these marks, Poirot said, tracing them with a fingertip, indicate force. Why would a man force his own desk? Hastings crouched beside him. Perhaps someone broke it open after his death. Ah, but then, Poirot said quietly, someone entered a locked room. He stooped again, extracting a small thread from the carpet. Silk, he murmured, holding it to the light. Burgundy, too fine for Mr. Blackwood's sober attire. A woman's glove, perhaps, or a gentleman's cravat. Meadows bent to inspect it. Could belong to Miss Victoria? Possibly, Poirot said, slipping the thread into his pocket. Mrs. Pemberton appeared at the door, twisting her hands. Beg pardon, gentlemen. I've remembered something. The missing crystal glass I mentioned. I found it washed this morning in the kitchen, but no one admits to cleaning it. Poirot turned sharply. Was there residue? A faint scent, sweet and spicy, like the strange smell in the study. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Madam, you have done well. Unfortunately, the glass is washed, yes? I'm afraid so, sir. No matter. He turned to the inspector. We now have a mirror shattered with purpose, a drawer forced, incense ash, a missing cufflink, and a tainted glass. These things do not speak of despair, but of deception. Meadows looked grave. You think he was murdered? I think, Poirot said, someone arranged a suicide to conceal a crime. The powder upon that desk, it is not merely ash, but the residue of deceit. We shall call it the powder of deception, Inspector, and see what pattern it reveals. Chapter 4. The Weight of Secrets. By the next morning, the fog had lifted, revealing the pale clarity of a Yorkshire dawn. Yet inside Blackwood Manor, the atmosphere remained heavy. Poirot requested that the household gather in the library, a chamber lined with leather-bound volumes and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow every word. Victoria Blackwood sat stiffly in a wing-back chair, her black gloves motionless in her lap. Carstairs stood by the hearth, shoulders stooped. Mrs. Pemberton took her seat near the door, composed but uneasy. Poirot began without preamble. The coroner's report is complete. The cause of death, a gunshot to the right temple, fired at close range. Yet Dr. Thorndyke observed peculiarities, the trajectory inconsistent with self-infliction. Meadows confirmed with a nod. Almost impossible angle, given the arm's reach. Carstairs looked shaken. You're saying it wasn't suicide? I say only that the physical evidence disagrees, Poirot replied. But there are other puzzles. Miss Blackwood, you said your uncle was distracted. Can you recall any specific anxieties? Victoria hesitated. He took phone calls late, sometimes pacing. I thought it business stress. He avoided conversation, even meals. And telegrams? Poirot asked. Mrs. Pemberton interjected. Dozens, sir. 2-3 times a day lately. Always received privately. Were they preserved? He kept everything locked in the safe behind Madame Blackwood's portrait in the study. Within minutes they were there. The safe, a heavy Chubb model, loomed behind the late Mrs. Blackwood's painted smile. We'll have it forced open, Meadows said. Poirot raised a finger. Patience, Inspector. People often choose combinations of sentiment. Miss Blackwood, your aunt's maiden name? Thornhill, married 1903. Poirot turned the dial, 1903. The lock clicked obediently. Inside lay stacks of papers bound with red ribbon, a few velvet boxes, and several telegrams. Poirot untied the first bundle and read aloud. Whitmore and Associates, urgent losses, criminal charges imminent. Another, funds missing, families impatient, delay impossible. And one unsigned, save for initials. Reginald, the situation untenable. Produce the money by Friday or we are both ruined. CF. CF? Hastings repeated. Charles Fairfax, Victoria whispered. He was my uncle's associate, a friend. Or accomplice, Poirot said quietly. These messages speak of conspiracy. Among the papers, Mrs. Pemberton found a jewellery box. Inside lay heirlooms supposedly sold years ago to fund repairs. Diamonds, rubies, and a serpent-shaped brooch glinting darkly. He never sold them, Carstairs breathed. He was using false receipts. Indeed, Poirot said, maintaining appearances while sinking deeper in debt. Victoria's composure cracked. I knew he was struggling, but I didn't know he lied. Poirot's eyes softened. Many lies begin as protection, yet secrets bear weight, mademoiselle, and under enough strain, they crush the heart that conceals them. He closed the safe gently. This is no longer the tale of a proud man's despair, he said. It is the tale of a man trapped by deception, and perhaps killed for the secrets he could no longer bear to keep. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Archive. The revelation of Reginald Blackwood's fraudulent dealings transformed the tone of the investigation. What had seemed the tragedy of a ruined financier now looked like a crime built upon years of deception. Yet Poirot's methodical mind sought proof, not supposition. We have the man's ruin, he told Hastings, but we must find the shadow that moved behind it. That afternoon, they entered the archive room, a narrow chamber adjoining the library, filled with the scent of dust, paper, and old secrets. Shelves sagged under ledgers dating back to the 18th century, each labelled in Mr. Blackwood's precise hand. Mrs. Pemberton unlocked a tall cabinet, explaining, he spent hours in here these past weeks. Locked the door, spoke to himself. Sometimes I heard him pacing. Inside the cabinet lay chaos, letters half opened, envelopes torn, dates out of order, a stark contrast to Blackwood's usual orderliness. Poirot lifted a stack, frowning. 6 months ago, perfectly arranged. But 8 weeks ago, the system collapses. Disorder is often the handwriting of panic. Among the papers were several letters on the embossed stationery of Whitmore and Associates, a London legal firm. Poirot unfolded one and read aloud. Unless funds are replaced immediately, the clients will proceed with criminal charges. We can delay no longer. Another letter bore a different crest, the Marlborough Club, and was signed simply CF. The message was chilling in its brevity. Reginald, the scandal will destroy us both. If you cannot recover the money by Friday, I must act to protect myself. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The same initials as the telegram. Charles Fairfax. He is the spider in this web. Victoria, who had joined them quietly, spoke up. Mr. Fairfax was an investor, not a villain. He and Uncle often argued about strategies, yes, but he would never... Mademoiselle, Poirot interrupted softly, men who fear ruin are capable of astonishing invention. Mrs. Pemberton clasped her hands. I remember Fairfax visiting just last month. They quarrelled terribly. I heard Mr. Blackwood shouting, "You promised me safety, and now you abandon me." Poirot exchanged a quick glance with Hastings. You heard any mention of time or money? Something about Friday, she said, hesitating. And an amount, £50,000. They searched further, finding a notebook wedged behind a row of ledgers. The entries were in a trembling hand, marked by hasty corrections. Poirot read aloud. CF threatens. Exposure. If funds not restored, disaster. Insurance policy. Suicide clause. Death must appear accidental. Mirror must break. No reflection left to accuse me. Poirot paused. Mon Dieu, he murmured. He planned to stage his own murder to save his niece's inheritance. Hastings stared in disbelief. You mean he meant to die, but not as a suicide? Just so, said Poirot gravely. He sought to cheat the clause, not the law. But perhaps another learned of his plan and acted first. As they left the archives, Hastings asked, And the cufflink we found? Poirot stopped by the window, holding it up to the grey light. Not his. The engraving. CF. The initials return once more. The shadows in this archive whisper the same name. He slipped the cufflink into an envelope and sealed it carefully. We are close now, mon ami. The ghosts of numbers and ashes are beginning to speak. Chapter 6. The Gilded Deception. The next morning dawned pale and cold, but the air at Blackwood Manor pulsed with unease. Over breakfast, Inspector Meadows received a telegram from London. Fairfax missing from his residence since Tuesday evening, he read aloud. Substantial funds withdrawn from his accounts. Warrant issued for questioning. Victoria paled. Missing? But he's innocent, surely. Innocence, said Poirot quietly, must be proven by fact, not by charm. He turned the telegram over as if expecting further meaning in the creases. Tuesday evening again. The same night your uncle was last seen alive. Mrs. Pemberton entered, carrying the Morning Post. Forgive me, sir, but there's another telegram from Scotland Yard. Poirot took it. His eyes scanned swiftly, then gleamed. Ah, mais oui. Fairfax's car was sighted near Blackwood Manor Tuesday night at 8:30. He did not approach the house by the main drive. They followed the clue to the summer house, a small structure by the ornamental lake. Inside, the air was still heavy with the faint, sweet scent of incense. On the small table sat 2 crystal glasses and an ashtray containing the same reddish residue found in the study. 2 glasses, Hastings observed. So Blackwood was not alone. Precisely, said Poirot. And note the lipstick trace on one rim. A woman joined him here. Inspector Meadows frowned. But we assumed Fairfax met him. We assumed too much, Poirot said. Perhaps Fairfax was here, but not alone, and perhaps the lady's company was not innocent. Something glimmered on the floor. Poirot bent to pick up a burgundy leather glove, delicate and finely stitched. Très cher, he murmured. The twin of our silk thread. Mademoiselle, he added, turning to Victoria, do you recognize it? Her composure faltered. It may be mine. I walk by the lake often. And yet, Poirot said softly, this glove is damp only at the edges, not water-stained as one dropped days ago. It was left here recently, very recently. Victoria's voice trembled. You think I was here that night? I think, said Poirot, that this house holds 2 deceptions, one gilded, one true. Your uncle's life was tangled in both. Back inside the manor, Poirot outlined his theory to Meadows. Fairfax and Blackwood met Tuesday to settle accounts. A quarrel ensued, violent, perhaps fatal. A woman was present. Together, she and Fairfax staged the suicide. But the detail of the mirror, it is too elaborate for panic. It suggests planning. Hastings frowned. Then perhaps Fairfax's accomplice was the real mind behind it. Poirot nodded slowly. A woman clever enough to hide her reflection behind that broken glass. We must learn whether she acted from love or from greed. He looked once more toward the shattered mirror fragments spread on a cloth-covered tray. The gilding hides decay, Hastings, and this deception, it shines too brightly to be anything but deliberate. Chapter 7. The Final Performance. By afternoon, the storm that had brewed over Blackwood Manor broke, not in thunder, but in revelation. As Poirot and Inspector Meadows returned from the summer house, they found Victoria Blackwood in the front hall, suitcase in hand, her face pale beneath her black hat. "I must return to London," she announced briskly. "There are legal matters regarding my uncle's estate." Poirot's brows rose. "Ah, mademoiselle, your departure at this moment would be most ill-timed. There are complications, you see, questions that only you can answer." Meadows stepped forward, voice firm. "Miss Blackwood, I must ask you to remain until our inquiry concludes." Victoria's composure wavered. "I've told you everything I know. I came here for rest, not suspicion." "Indeed," said Poirot. "But truth, like art, requires rehearsal before its final performance. Let us retire to the library, where all good performances are properly staged." Within the library's dim grandeur, Poirot arranged his audience as if directing a play. Victoria sat rigidly in the high-backed chair near the hearth. Mrs. Pemberton and Carstairs flanked her, both uneasy. Meadows and Hastings stood near the door, silent witnesses. Poirot paced before them, his hands folded behind his back, his green eyes gleaming. "Mes amis," he began, "we face a case that masqueraded as suicide. Yet behind the curtain lies a drama of greed, deceit, and most ingenious staging. The death of Reginald Blackwood was murder, but not of the kind we were meant to believe." He turned toward Victoria. "Mademoiselle, your uncle did not die Wednesday evening as assumed. He died the previous night, Tuesday, during a meeting at the summer house." Gasps filled the room. "The scene in his study," Poirot continued, "was arranged afterward. Papers scattered, mirror broken, revolver placed, all to suggest despair. But it was theatre, not truth," Carstairs protested. "I saw the study light burning that night." "Ah, yes," Poirot said softly, and heard movement within. "But what you heard was not Mr. Blackwood. It was someone completing the deception." Victoria's voice cracked. "You accuse me of this madness?" "I accuse you of knowledge," Poirot replied. "You knew of Fairfax's schemes. You joined him when your own finances faltered. But you underestimated the danger of partnership with a desperate man." He reached into his pocket and produced two small objects, a cuff-link engraved CF and a burgundy glove. "Evidence, mademoiselle, speaks when people do not. The cuff-link tells us Fairfax entered this room. The glove tells us a woman was with him." Victoria trembled visibly. Poirot pressed on. "Together you and Fairfax plotted the perfect illusion, your uncle's murder disguised as his own hand. The motive? Insurance, inheritance, and the silence of a man who knew too much. But Fairfax was a coward, easily manipulated. You, mademoiselle, were the mind behind the design." Victoria rose, pale as marble. "You cannot prove that." "Ah," said Poirot gently, "but I can. Mrs. Pemberton identified Fairfax's car outside the estate Tuesday evening. You claimed ignorance of his visit, yet you never asked how I knew. That, mademoiselle, betrayed you. Only one who already knew of his presence would not be surprised." The silence that followed was unbearable. At last Victoria's poise crumbled. "He was going to confess," she cried. "He would have ruined us both. I only meant to frighten him, but when he wouldn't listen—" Meadows stepped forward, handcuffs glinting. "Victoria Blackwood, I must arrest you for the murder of Reginald Blackwood." She made no protest as he led her away, only whispered, "He forced me to it." Poirot watched her go, his expression unreadable. "The play ends, Hastings," he said quietly, "and as always, the final act reveals the truth." Chapter 8. The Unravelling Truth. The arrest of Victoria Blackwood rippled through Yorkshire like a cold wind. Yet, even as the manor emptied of police and servants, Poirot remained unsatisfied. "There are threads," he told Hastings, "still loose. I detest loose threads." They returned to the study the next morning. The shattered mirror had been removed, leaving a blank space on the wall where its reflection once lived. "The illusion is gone," Hastings said. "We've unmasked her, haven't we?" "Perhaps," Poirot murmured, "but a mask often hides another beneath it." Inspector Meadows arrived with grim news. "Fairfax has been found," he said. "Dead in his hotel room at Dover. Gunshot wound to the head, revolver in hand. A suicide note confessing to the financial fraud, but denying any role in Blackwood's murder." Poirot's moustache twitched. "How very convenient. The dead cannot contradict the living." He crossed to the window Carstairs had mentioned earlier, examining faint scratches on the sill. "Rope fibres," he noted. "They lifted Blackwood's body through this window. Too precise for panic, too practiced for amateurs." Hastings blinked. "So Victoria staged the scene alone?" "Not quite. Fairfax may have helped move the body before fleeing, but her mind orchestrated every gesture." Mrs. Pemberton entered, balancing a tea tray, as though clinging to routine. "If it pleases you, gentlemen, tea." Poirot accepted a cup with a nod. "Madame, tell me, did you ever observe a closeness between Miss Blackwood and Mr. Fairfax?" "Indeed, sir," she said quietly. "They were attentive. Walked the gardens together, ever since her engagement was broken." "Ah," Poirot said, "the broken engagement. A wound dressed in silk, yes?" Meadows took a seat. Her fiancé's family learned the truth, apparently. The estate was already drowning in debt. "So," Poirot said, "she knew long before arriving that her uncle's fortune was a mirage." By afternoon, a second telegram arrived from London. Fairfax's accounts revealed a hoard of cash, £10,000 in multiple currencies, and several letters from Victoria outlining in veiled language her intention to resolve the matter permanently. Hastings read them in silence. "She planned both deaths," he said finally. "Her uncle's for gain, Fairfax's for silence." Poirot folded the letters neatly. "It is the oldest deception, mon ami, using love as a mask for greed. Fairfax thought himself the puppet master. In truth, he was the string." As the sun faded, Poirot stood once more before the empty mirror frame. "The reflection returns," he murmured. "Not of a man's guilt, but of a woman's ambition. The mirror shows betrayal. Family, lover, conscience, all shattered by one hand." Hastings sighed. "I'll never understand how people live with such lies." "They do not live, Hastings," Poirot said softly. "They only perform until the curtain falls." The case of the shattered mirror was closed, yet for Poirot its fragments would remain lodged in memory, a study of vanity, deception, and the fragile reflections men and women mistake for truth. Chapter 9. Reflections on Justice. A week after Victoria Blackwood's arrest, Poirot sat once more in his comfortable London apartment, the bustle of the city murmuring faintly through the windows. Yet his thoughts remained fixed upon Blackwood Manor and the woman whose beauty had masked such cruelty. Captain Hastings, seated opposite with the morning paper, studied his friend with concern. "You seem unusually pensive, old chap. Still brooding over the case?" Poirot set down his cup of tisane with care. "Brooding, no. Reflecting, yes. The matter of Miss Blackwood continues to trouble my sense of order. Her deceit, it was not born of impulse, but of design." He gestured to a neat stack of documents on his desk. "These are the final reports from Inspector Meadows and the solicitors handling the estate. They reveal a pattern most illuminating." Hastings unfolded the first report. "Good Lord," he breathed. She'd been manipulating her uncle's finances for years. These transactions, falsified, siphoned into accounts under assumed names. Precisely, said Poirot. 3 years, mon ami, 3 years of subtle sabotage. She encouraged her uncle to make the riskiest investments, while quietly ensuring their failure. When ruin arrived, she could appear the innocent victim. And Fairfax? Ah, Poirot said, the perfect accomplice. A man of charm, but little strength. He believed he guided her. In truth, she guided him. First to embezzle, then to murder. Poirot turned another document, its edges faintly singed. See here, insurance policies she persuaded her uncle to purchase, each with clauses against suicide. She prepared for his death long before she decided its form. Hastings exhaled. She was building the stage before she even wrote the play. Très juste, Poirot said softly, and every player danced to her rhythm, even the poor young man to whom she was once engaged. You recall the broken engagement? Hastings nodded. A matter of money, wasn't it? Poirot's eyes darkened. More than money. The young gentleman discovered her deceptions, small at first, yet revealing. She retaliated not with violence, but with ruin. False accusations destroyed his reputation. He fled to Australia. She learned early, mon ami, that to kill a man's name is sometimes safer than killing the man himself. A knock at the door interrupted them. Inspector Meadows entered, weary but satisfied. I thought you'd want the conclusion first-hand, Monsieur Poirot. Victoria has confessed, fully, not only to her uncle's murder but also to Fairfax's. Claims she acted alone in the end, calling it the necessary conclusion of the design. Cold as ice she was. And remorse? Poirot asked quietly. None, Meadows replied. She spoke of her crimes as achievements, proof of intellect, not wickedness. There was even pride. He hesitated. She mentioned something strange, that in her cell she spends hours before the little mirror provided, talking to her reflection. Poirot's moustache drooped slightly. Ah, the mirrors again, he murmured. From Blackwood's shattered glass to her own cold looking-glass in prison. Always reflections, always lies pretending to be truth. When Meadows had gone, Hastings asked, Do you think she'll ever feel regret? Poirot's gaze lingered on the grey London sky. Non, mon ami. Some souls see only their own image, never the world beyond. Victoria Blackwood is one such. She built her kingdom upon reflections, and now, in prison, she rules them. Still, he rose, drawing the curtains against the fading light. Justice is done, perhaps. But satisfaction, that is another matter. The mirror may be broken, yet its fragments continue to wound. Chapter 10. The Mirror's Final Secret. 3 months later, when the memory of the Blackwood affair had begun to fade from the newspapers, Poirot received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Pemberton, the former housekeeper of Blackwood Manor, sat primly in his drawing-room, her black dress neat, her gloved hands folded. "I beg your pardon for calling unannounced, Monsieur Poirot," she began, "but before I emigrate to Canada to live with my sister, my conscience compels me to tell you something I should have said months ago." Poirot inclined his head. "The truth, madame, never chooses its hour poorly. Pray continue." She hesitated. "It concerns the mirror, sir, the one shattered in Mr. Blackwood's study. I told you I saw it intact Tuesday afternoon. That was true, but I did not mention that I returned later that night to empty the wastebasket I'd forgotten. The door was locked, yet I heard voices within, a man's and a woman's. The man was Mr. Fairfax. I knew his tone. The woman—" Mrs. Pemberton's voice trembled. "At first I thought it was Miss Victoria, but her manner was different, harsher, colder, with a slight foreign accent." Poirot leaned forward, eyes glinting. "You heard what they said?" "Only fragments, sir. The woman spoke of completing the arrangement and no loose ends." Mr. Fairfax protested, saying the plan was too dangerous. Then I heard Mr. Blackwood's voice, frightened, pleading. After that, a sound like glass breaking, and silence. I was terrified and fled to my room. Poirot was silent for several moments, fingers steepled. "And you are certain of the accent?" Quite, sir. Continental, not French, more Eastern perhaps. She hesitated again, drawing a small parcel from her handbag. I found this the next morning in the fireplace of the morning room. I thought it rubbish, but after your letters about Victoria's trial, I began to wonder. Inside the tissue lay a half-burned photograph of a striking dark-haired woman wearing an elaborate emerald serpent brooch. The image was scorched at the edges, but still hauntingly vivid. Poirot's expression hardened. "Madame," he said quietly, "you have brought me the shadow that escaped justice." He rose and fetched a slim folder from his desk. Within lay police notices from across Europe. Yes, here. The same brooch, the same eyes. Katerina Volkov, a Russian émigré suspected of orchestrating inheritance frauds from Vienna to Madrid. Her victims, wealthy, isolated, easily deceived. Hastings, who had entered midway through, stared. Then she was there? That night? Undoubtedly, said Poirot. Victoria and Fairfax were not the masterminds, but puppets. Madame Volkov pulled the strings and cut them when danger approached. Mrs. Pemberton looked horrified. Then Victoria confessed for nothing? Poirot sighed. Not for nothing, madame. Her guilt remains, but the greater evil remains free. After she left, Poirot stood long at his window, London's lights flickering like shards of glass. The mirror was shattered, he murmured, to hide more than one reflection. Behind each fragment lies another truth. He turned toward Hastings. Justice, mon ami, is a patient mirror. Some day it will show Madame Volkov her own face. He extinguished the lamp, leaving the room in shadow. Until then, he whispered, the death behind the shattered mirror will never rest.